Welcome to the panel, today's panel number 1 of the conference. Please let me introduce myself. I am Dalinda Perez Alvarez, and I am Deputy Head of International Recruitment at the University of Edinburgh, working here from Chile. And it is a pleasure to be at this panel. And I'm just going to share with you the name of the panel will be Student-Centered Approaches as Key Factors in Successful Bilingual Programs. I want to remind you that the cameras and microphones are going to be blocked. And this will be a session that will be questions and answers to the panelists from myself. So unfortunately, no time for questions and answers from the attendees. Nevertheless, I think this would be a very, very interesting panel in this way. So the objective of the panel is on student-centered learning, which claims to be one of the effective tools in learning process. In this regard, our participants will answer questions, as I just said, related to the impact of adopting student-centered education in bilingual contexts. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the 4 panelists that are going to be participating today. First, Mr. Bob Findlay, who is an experienced board-level executive in international education leader with a particular interest in bilingual education. Bob has completed over 60 school reviews with a focus on improving teaching and learning and management and organization. We are privileged to have him as part of our panel this afternoon to share his experience in relation to best practices in bilingual classes. Thank you, Bob, for being here. I would also want to introduce Ms. Tatiana Bustos. She is the Global Director of the Bilingual Program in Cognita, Chile. She is a bilingual teacher and an educational leader with a vast experience in bilingual education from kindergarten to 8th grade. She is an expert in bilingual methodologies and declares that any student can learn contents in different languages if they are exposed to the correct inputs from the teacher. Thanks, Tatiana, for being here. I would also want to introduce Mr. Billy Forward. He's a Cambridge Delta qualified teacher and teacher training who currently runs the Cambridge PDQ Teaching and Learning Certificate and provides training and support for the Cambridge International Education Associate Schools in Chile, Instituto Chileno Británico. He is an expert in active methodologies, which are essential for the learning process. Thanks, Billy, also for being here with us this afternoon. And last but not at all least, Ms. Valeria Capetillo, who is the Digital Learning Advisor in Cognita Schools in Chile. She is also one of 2 Microsoft Innovative Educator Experts in Chile. She won a national hacking competition in 2021 and is part of the Robo1 team that will compete in Japan in 2023. She aims to improve the performance of the Chilean educational system by helping teachers to reduce their time of paperwork and engaging students and parents using EdTech. Very welcome also, Valeria. Good. So if we should kick off, I would want to ask the first question to Bob, who, as we know, he best practices in the classroom. So that's his expertise. So Bob, which are the best practices that you have identified as essential in a bilingual lesson?
I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to be very quick on this. Yeah, the first one is really obvious, and it's the daily lesson plan. And it really, good practice, you see that the lesson plan is linked to the curriculum and also then to the short, medium and long-term plans for the department or the school if it's a bilingual school. In terms of the classroom itself, it's really quite interesting. When you see really good practice, there are a number of characteristics. Really smooth and swift transitions, and hopefully I'll be able to talk a little bit more about transitions later on. Not spending too long on filling activities, things like colouring, cutting, drawing, not being over dependent on books alone or worksheets. I think providing sufficient and meaningful reinforcement, and when I say reinforcement, activities that reinforce the objective of the lesson are really important and significant, and something that you see in really excellent practice. Each class will have a range of ability, range of capability of the students. Teachers are really very good at picking up students that are struggling, and often the students that tend to get forgotten are at the other end of the spectrum. They're the very, very able students who finish tasks quickly. So extension activities for those that complete tasks, or the tasks that are supporting the learning objective, is really important. Otherwise, those students, as I say, teachers are very good at picking up on the students that are struggling. They just tend to, if the students have got it and they're on task, they just tend to leave them. And the tendency again is that those students finish quickly. So if they finish quickly, there's wasted learning time because they sit there doing very little, and it can lead to behavior management issues. If they finish, they're bored, there's a tendency for them then to to interfere with other students or to go walk about and distract other students from their tasks. So it's a hallmark of really, really good practice. And I don't see it often enough, unfortunately. I think the other factor that's really important, and it relates to, I'm going to use the word learning objective. The objective has to be clear. I often see objective written on, whiteboards or whatever. So teachers can sometimes be very good at that. The word objective is pretty meaningless. I think it's much better to say what we're going to learn today, so that students understand the focus of the lesson. Again, in very good practice, teachers will refer back to prior learning, to the last lesson. They will make a link from what they learned previously to what they're going to learn today. And then at the end of the lesson, they will also make a linkage to what's going to happen next time round. So you get a sense of continuity, or the students get a sense of continuity in terms of their learning process. I think with young children, to get them excited is really good, but you have to have a balance between, we call them stirring activities, activities that get the kids excited, and calming activities. You can't keep students, particularly young children, at a very high level of excitement. It's counterproductive. So it's almost like a wave. So it's a stirring activity, a calming activity, a stirring activity, a calming activity. And again, you see that in very good practice.
Thank you, Bob. I don't know if we can, sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You know how we're going here.
Yeah, we're tight
Thank
on
you.
time, I know. I could talk for this on hours.
Thank you so much for what you have shared with us. And I would now like to speak to Tatiana Bustos, whose expertise is bilingual methodology. So I would like to ask you, Tatiana, what do bilingual teachers need to consider in order to improve students' performance in bilingual classrooms? Oh, I think you are on mute.
Yeah, I think she's muted.
Yeah, you are on mute.
There, yes?
There, yes.
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. So sorry. Well, thank you for inviting us. Cognita, as Cognita, we are super proud of being here and being able to answer these questions that may help people. Well, there are three things that teachers need to know in order to be effective in bilingual lessons, and they are super specific. The first one is that they need knowledge about second language acquisition. Bilingual teachers need to know about second language acquisition. For example, two very well-known terms in pedagogy with English language learners, BICS and CALP. BICS is your basic interpersonal communication skills, or the social language, or the backyard language, as they say. Let's say, hello, how are you? What's your name? My name is Tatiana. Okay, so the basic communication skills. But the academic language is called CALP, and this is the cognitive academic language proficiency. So BICS and CALP. Now, as students acquire language, they first go through the BICS stage, and they pick that up really fast within a year or two. But the CALP, I'm talking about again about the cognitive academic language, takes between 5 to 7 years or longer or less, depending on the students. So, and that's the language that students need in order to be successful in the content classes and in assessment. So bilingual teachers need to know about knowledge. They need to know about second language acquisition. This is the first thing. The second is that they need specific instructional techniques for making content area concepts comprehensible for English learners, instructional techniques to use in the classroom. For example, word walls, we promote a lot that in our classrooms. Concept maps when they are in primary, personal dictionaries, and among others. I mean, there are many instructional techniques, but you will choose the best one depending on the subject that you are teaching and depending on the level your students belong to, yes? And the other one is that teachers need professional development on the integration of content and language. They need to know about language acquisition, they need to know about instructional techniques, but they also need to know how to integrate content and language in the lesson. For example, the math lesson or the science lesson. Teachers need to know how to teach the language necessary for English learners to understand and talk about the content. They need to know, for example, which are the most effective components to address the academic and linguistic needs of English learners. So we are talking about lesson preparation. Bob mentioned that. They need to build background. They need to provide comprehensible input. They need to know about strategies students need to use in order to understand what's going on. Interaction is really, really important in a bilingual classroom. Practice and application, lesson delivery, review, and assessment. So I think that basically these are the three, this is in my opinion, of course, the three important things that teachers need to know. Need to know about language acquisition. They need to have professional development on the integration of content and language. And of course, they need to know specific instructional techniques for making content area concepts comprehensible for English learners. So this would be Belinda.
Now I am muted. Thank you so much, Tatiana. Very interesting indeed. Thanks for your answer. Billy Forward, who is an specialist in active learning. How interesting as well. May I ask you, Billy, what is active learning and why should teachers use it?
I'm going to start with a misconception of what active learning is, because you've got the word active, which has these two meanings. And a lot of people think active learning means that the students need to be up and running around the room and being physically active. But active learning is more about the students being active in the learning process and taking part in the learning process themselves. So active learning is also, it comes from the social constructivist approach to learning. And it's about students working together to construct knowledge and construct meaning as well. So a lot of active learning activities will be students working together in groups, working together in pairs to build their knowledge together. What else can I say about active learning? It's also a process, not just a process of thinking actively and being part of their own learning process, but it's also about reflecting on how they are learning and how well they have learned. So it's a reflective process where they have to think back on what they have done, how well they have done it, and how they can improve in the next steps of whatever activity they're doing. And active learning strategies can range from a lot of different types of activities. For example, project-based learning is active learning, inquiry-based learning is active learning. And a simple activity like think, pair, share. I don't know if you've heard of this activity, but this is important about giving students time to think about a question you ask them. There was a study done called Beyond the Black Box, or the Black Box, about how long teachers give their students to think about a question they ask before they intervene and help the students out. And basically, it's very little time. It's under 5 seconds, and the students don't really have time to think about the question that you've asked them. So think, pair, share. You give the students first a minute, 2 minutes to think about the question that you've given them, so that every student can think of their ideas on the topic and can develop an opinion. Then you put them together in pairs, and they can discuss their ideas with their pair and see where they agree or disagree and come to kind of a conclusion together, and then share with the whole class as a group. And that's one of the big go-to, quite easy to use active learning strategies that you can do in the classroom. Whereas at the other end, project-based learning, inquiry-based learning are much more complex and have a lot more steps in them to implement.
Good. And why should teachers use it?
I mean, particularly in the bilingual classroom, the good thing about active learning is it requires a lot of use of language, because they're working together in groups, because they're working together in pairs. They have to talk a lot. They have to develop new language skills in order to complete the activities and projects, build the vocabulary, share the vocabulary. So I think in the bilingual classroom, it's a very good source of communication and useful communication, where they're learning about the topic and getting new language about the topic, but as well practicing their English and improving their English along the way as well. Secondly, if you talk about Edgar Dale's study, if you get the students to go up to the higher end of Bloom's taxonomy, so they're creating or they're evaluating, if you get them into that area of Bloom's taxonomy, they're more likely to remember what they have done than if you were just to feed them information, show them a video, tell them something. They're much less likely to remember that. I can't remember the exact percentages, but I think Edgar Dale says if you read something, you'll remember about 5% of what you read. But if you actually make something or do something, it gets into the 80–90% of actually being able to recall what you have learned. So that's one of the big advantages of active learning as well.
Great. Oh, thank you, Billy. Thank you for the answer, and very interesting. Valeria Capetillo, an expert in EdTech, and how exciting about going to Japan soon. Tell me, Valeria, we hear many terms in relation to technology, but one that is being frequently used is EdTech. Please, can you explain to us what do we mean by the term EdTech?
Well, thanks for having me here. EdTech, a combination of education and technology, refers to hardware and also software designed to boost teacher-led training in classrooms and also improve students' education outcomes. But the main purpose is to improve the learning experience, accelerate students' progress, and equip young people to thrive in a digital world. Technology is here to stay and it will continue to evolve. The World Economic Forum estimates that 65% of children today will end up in careers that don't even exist yet. So that's why we have an opportunity, but also we should, as teachers or as schools, to first engage our parents and students in the use of EdTech, so parents can maximize the benefits and feed into development while empowering the next generation of digital citizens, and helping them to take ownership of their digital lives. Also, we have to develop teacher capabilities through the professional development and certification of teachers in EdTech to ensure our educators are able to optimize educational outcomes using the latest and best technologies. Third, we need to develop a support culture in every school to ensure that schools are ready to realize and sustain the benefits of using EdTech. Teach our students how to be digital citizens. Digital citizenship is the set of skills that kids need to be in order to be safe and responsible while using technology. This includes, for example, thinking critically and not trusting everything they see, being safe with their information and who they connect with, and also acting responsibly on how they communicate and behave.
Excellent. Thank you, Valeria. Thank you very much indeed. A topic that is there and there to stay, I'm sure. Bob, if I can ask you another question, could
Sure.
you please talk to us a little more about one highly effective practice that teachers can easily and quickly implement in their bilingual classroom?
A really simple one is the way that teachers question and pose questions to their students. If you use closed questions, you're going to get single word answers. An example, so this is from a parent's perspective. They ask the child, the student, did you enjoy school today? They'll get probably a one-word answer. It'll be binary. It'll be yes or no. If you ask them, what did you do at school today? Then you're going to force the language. They will have to say something more than yes or no. So the use of open questioning is really significant and very important. It's something that's really simple that every teacher can do and should be aware of. I think in addition to that, supplementary questions. So let's go back to what did you do? Or, did you enjoy school today? What did you do at school today? If the student then explains what they did, a supplementary question would be, so what did you enjoy about whatever they did? So the combination of open questioning and supplementary questioning will force the language. So that's very, very simple stuff. And it's something that every teacher can do, every language teacher can do, once they're aware of the difference between open and closed questions.
Great. Thank you so much. Tatiana, if I now go back to you, may I ask you, why should bilingual teachers integrate content and language acquisition in the classroom? Oh,
Yes, I know, I am this again.
sorry.
Yeah, I do it because I don't want to interrupt my peers, you know. So yeah, here I am. Thank you very much. Well, the question is why teachers, why should bilingual teachers need to integrate content and language acquisition in the classroom? Well, students need to know that all disciplines or all subjects have specific vocabulary words, specific transitions, for example, and sequence ideas in a particular order. So students need to know the academic language that every subject needs in order to learn it, you know. There is this big discrepancy where a student may be socializing in your class, for example, and you feel that they are language proficient and understand English, but then they take the test and they fail. So why? Because the academic language proficiency is not there. So as teachers, we need to work with our students and bring into our lesson activities that will help hone that cognitive academic language proficiency. It is essential then that any bilingual lesson is structured around two objectives, the content objective and the language objective. The content objective is related to the objectives that the governments, for example, indicate. The Ministry of Education of our country is telling us that in math, these are the objectives that the students need to learn. So this is the content objective. But the language objective is the objective that has to do with the linguistic evidence that the student will show so that the teacher can see, listen, in some argument or in written that tells that the student has learned that content. So language objective is always connected to some linguistic evidence of that learning. And the content objective is related to the general objective indicated in any curriculum that we are following. Apart from that, other reason is that the teachers need to provide also comprehensible input in their lessons so that the students can understand what is going on in that content or the specific language or terms or vocabulary words or transitions or ideas. In this aspect, the word translanguaging is important. And when I say translanguaging, I don't mean translating, but understanding that this concept has a partner in my own language. So if I say photosynthesis, I mean it's photosynthesis. So we can sometimes understand that concepts have two names without translating, but using the translanguaging will help teachers. So I think that this is interesting. If we really want to integrate content and language acquisition in the classroom, the content and language objectives, the comprehensible input, and translanguaging are very helpful and will help our students to learn in the bilingual classroom, the content and the language. And so that's it, Belinda. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you very much. Billy, may I ask another question? So, how do we know active learning is happening in the classroom? What does active learning look like?
It's a funny question you ask. one sign of an active learning classroom is it's a lot noisier than your normal classroom. And some teachers have explained this to me, that they sometimes have the teacher, when they're doing active learning approaches that I've taught them, they have the teacher next door come knock on the door and say, "Where's the discipline in your classroom? There's so much noise. I can't focus on my lesson in there." And you're like, this isn't a class without discipline. This is a class where active learning is taking place. Students are communicating about the topic. They're talking together. So that's why it's generally a lot louder. There's a lot more movement in the classroom. There's a lot more social interaction as part of the process. So that's one of the big things about active learning. And you'll see that the students are much more independent. You don't have the teacher standing at the front telling the students what they need to know, and this is the information, and take pictures or take notes. The students are doing the learning, and the teacher is moving around, monitoring, seeing where effective questioning is needed, as Robert mentions, giving them the right open questions to guide them to the learning that they need to do. Okay, noticing that they're off track. Okay, I'm going to ask this question. This is going to bring them back on track, back to what they need to reach and how they need to get there. And the students are learning much more independently. So a lot of the time in an active learning classroom, let's say they're doing a project, you would bring in the books and resources and computers they need, and they would move around the room and access those resources as they need. Because part of the process of active learning, you're also learning independent learning skills, which are going to serve you in all the other subjects and are going to serve you in later life when you go to university. Learning these skills about where can I find information to complete a project? How can I best organize myself within a team, within a group to be successful at completing this project? What am I best at within this group? Okay, and giving these students their independence to learn these things gives them these skills that when they go to university later in life, they're going to be much better prepared for being an independent learner and having to learn things without the support of a teacher being there to hold their hand, to give them the information. So that's the biggest thing for me. It's a much more noisy place, a much more active place, as in there is a lot more movement, a lot more talking between students. But I also believe it's a much more constructive place for learning than a room where students are always just sitting there silently and listening to the teacher. So that for me is the benefit of active learning.
Nice. And basically like how to do this. Really interesting. Thank you, Billy. Valeria, another question for you from me. Why should teachers be thinking about using EdTech with their students? What are the benefits for our bilingual learners?
Thank you. Well, Billy talked about active learning, and I know that bilingual teachers know a lot about this. I've seen the think pair share activity, which is awesome, but think about having the opportunity of doing this activity, but with students from another country. That's why EdTech is a very useful tool for us. As teacher of a second language, we know that it's important to provide students opportunities to use the English language in meaningful ways. EdTech tools like CISO, for example, let students practice the language through listening, speaking, writing, and drawing, for example, and also gives them an authentic audience, which is motivating. There are plenty of examples in which you can use the active learning by using EdTech as a tool. So I think that's the main importance of using EdTech in the bilingual world. Thank you.
No, thank you. And what a nice link there. Interesting. Well, if we are concise, I think that we can go through another question for each of the panelists. So I'm very happy that we are having time for that. So Bob, if I can ask you another question, how do you monitor and support teachers to make sure these practices are being used in the bilingual classroom, best practices?
It's a really interesting question. The basis of any form of improvement, whether it's individual lessons or school improvement as a whole, really relates to classroom observation. You've got to get into the classroom. So those that are responsible for bilingual programs, teacher evaluation, call it whatever you will, it is absolutely critical. I think often you see fairly infrequent observations, you know, perhaps 2-3 times a year. You can't really understand what a particular teacher is doing unless you're into the classroom more frequently. So the whole of the monitoring and assessment process in terms of the teachers relates to classroom observation, and they need to be as frequent as possible. You don't need to spend 45 minutes in the classroom. You can chunk, you can do smaller amounts of time more frequently. And I think for those that are doing the evaluation, that's a really important process. Get into the classrooms as frequently as you can. At the lowest end of the spectrum, there's something called learning walks, where it's literally just 5 minutes in a classroom where those that are observing the teachers spend a little bit of time in the classroom, and it's surprising what you can pick up in a very short period of time. So I think that's point one. I think point two, and it comes back again to the whole of the process of how do we improve, and I think that relates to the mechanism of feedback, how you feed back to teachers. Often there's very little training that's given in how to observe, and even less training given in how to feed back to teachers. And that's a really important mechanism. You're privileged to go into a teacher's classroom, so the least you can do is feedback and feedback effectively. And the final element of that for me is moderation. When I say moderation, where you have a number of individuals that are responsible for observation, you need to be able to moderate those observations. In other words, what you want to be able to do is to ensure that what each observer is observing has consistency to it. And that's really quite important as well. And that really is the basis of improvement. And it's not exclusive to language teaching.
Good, thank you. Thank you so much, Bob. Tatiana, please, can you recommend 1 or 2 strategies for bilingual teachers that positively impact their learners?
Well, if I have to recommend something to teachers, I will tell them, please emphasize productive language. Productive language skills, the ones that are hard to master, like speaking and writing, they should be front and center from day one, even if students feel hesitant about them. Beginners, for example, often develop receptive language skills like listening and reading first. So sometimes teachers, when we are unaware of the typical path to fluency, we may believe that students who can follow verbal or written directions will be able to produce oral or written language, but that's usually not the case. So please emphasize productive language. And that is the best way to help our English language learners to learn English. Interact, product. Remember, linguistic evidence of the learning is necessary in every bilingual class. Some other recommendation would be to support, for example, reluctant speakers using sentence frames. This is quite popular, but for example, if you just tell them, use I think or I wonder, in year one, this sentence frame provides like clues that empower students to sound and think like scientists. So you tell them, I think, I wonder, I believe. You use the sentence frames. And something that I discovered a couple of months ago and that I really like was this acronym SWIRL, 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 which stands for speak, write, interact, read, and listen. If we swirl, we are privileging productive language skills from the beginning. So I think that we bilingual teachers need to swirl every day and in every lesson to have our students producing, speaking, writing, interacting, reading, and listening in every lesson. So I think that that would be my recommendations, Dalinda. Thank you.
Excellent. I was writing down what swirl is.
Swirl.
Yes, I love it.
So let's swirl.
Yes, excellent. I love it. Thank you, Tatiana. If I can now go with Billy, what active learning strategies do you recommend for teachers, and how do they implement them?
I'm gonna give you some suggestions, some ideas, but I hate to like just recommend active learning strategies. I think the most important thing to start with first is like a backwards design approach to your planning. First, you need to think, what is my lesson aim? How am I going to assess that? And then choose the best active learning strategy to achieve that. I think it's the wrong idea to find an active learning strategy you like and go, okay, how can I manipulate this active learning strategy to reach my assessment and my aim? Okay, so the main sort of focus of your planning should be, what is my objective in this lesson and how am I going to assess it? And then you can choose the best active learning approach. Active learning approaches are very varied. Like an activity of ordering something. So you give them cutout cards, maybe 2 columns with vertebrates and invertebrates, and they have to work together, discuss in their groups which of these animals are vertebrates, which of these animals are invertebrates, and organize them onto the table. That's a nice active learning strategy, and it can be used in lots of different contexts. In a similar way, getting them to do clines, where something is at the top and something is at the bottom, the most important, the least important. Think, pair, share, I've already mentioned. Debates, peer teaching is another really good one. The only downside of peer teaching is they tend to learn the most about the thing they have to peer teach, and they learn less about the thing that they're taught by their classmates. So you have to find a way to balance that out. So once they've been taught, you have to get the other students to be being taught kind of actively as well. And after the lesson has been done, you need to kind of test the students to see how well that lesson has been achieved. But that's another strategy. I can share a link to a very good scheme that the Northern Ireland Education Board did, where for each key stage, they published a book of active learning strategies that teachers can use. And these include reflection strategies like lollipop sticks. Have you heard of lollipop sticks? You give your students 3 different colored lollipop sticks: green, amber or orange, and red. And after they've done an activity, to see how well you want them to self-reflect how well they've learned it. If they haven't learned it well, they hold up the red lollipop stick. If they've learned it so-so and they still need more information, the orange lollipop stick, and the green lollipop stick if they understand everything clearly. So there are lots of strategies like that in there, as well as strategies for actively learning the content as well. So I will share that in the chat. I think my link goes straight to key stage 1 and 2, because that's the main area I work with. But for each of the key stages, I think they have PDF guides for active learning strategies that you can use going up to key stage 4, possibly, maybe even beyond that to 16 plus, I'm not sure.
Right.
So that's what I say. The most important thing, I just shared it with,
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't know if everyone got it. But I
Yes,
did
yes,
just share the
Thank
link.
you. Great.
I am, thank you for
But
that.
for
I
me, the
am
most important thing is,
Yes, I am asking Isabel if she can share it with the people that are attending the session. So yes, she'll make sure
Okay.
to please share it with everyone. But thank you for that.
yeah, no problem. So I was going to say that the last point I want to say is please don't choose an active learning strategy and try to make that fit your lesson aims. Please start with the lesson aim, start with the way you're going to assess it, and then choose the right strategy to go with that. Okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, and I understand that Isabel has already shared the link with everyone that is attending. So thank you for sharing that, Billy, and thank you for sharing it, Isabel. Valeria, one last question for you. How do bilingual teachers get started with EdTech? What can you recommend for teachers in this sense?
It's a hard question too, because if I have to choose just one tool, it's difficult, but I will suggest and recommend two ways. First, if you want to learn by your own, if you want to learn more about of technology and you want to feel confident about using EdTech, I can recommend the Microsoft Learn platform. I will send the link through the chat later. And so you can take very short courses in terms of using some different applications and also how to teach with using these tools. And also, I will recommend an application that is very useful for bilingual teachers, since everyone learns at their own pace and at their own style. EdTech tools make it easier for teachers to create customized learning experience that foster a sense of inclusivity and boost the learning capabilities of all students, no matter their age or learning abilities. That's why I love EdTech. So I like to recommend using the CISO app. CISO is designed to help teachers to interact and set tasks for their classes, whether they are working at home or in the classroom, and regardless of the topic. So it's very useful for bilingual teachers. Basically, it's an online portfolio, and also you can apply the swirl techniques that Tatiana was talking before. It has a free version in which you can create your classroom with individual students and also two teachers. Logging into it's quite easy because students just have to scan a QR code. Families at home can download the app and see their students' progress and help them if needed. You can send little kids oral feedback as easy as sending a WhatsApp audio on you, or you can write a comment, rate their performance using stars, and see their progress on a very useful dashboard. Also, you can share your best activities or use other activities from teachers around the world inside the app. It has a wide range of activities created according to every level. As a result, it improves teachers' productivity in terms of planning, delivery, and assessment. As bilingual teachers, you may face the problem when delivering homework because they are in English and our families, they don't speak English sometimes. So CISO helps you with communication with parents. A tool like CISO can facilitate this with its translation feature that allows our students and parents to read notes, captions, or comments in their native language. Having the opportunity to communicate with families in their native language helps to promote the home-school connection, which is important for any student's success. Finally, I would like you to our Cognita School of the Future conference in October, so you can learn from our EdTech teachers and keynotes from the EdTech world. Technology is fundamentally changing the opportunities for educators, so we cannot miss the opportunity to learn from other colleagues and share our best practice with the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Thank you for sharing with us the information about the upcoming conference. Thank you. That's really good. And if you can share the link that you were talking about, that would be great. In the meantime, I'm just going to remind everyone of what swirl means or what it stands for. So it is S for speaking, W for writing, I for interacting, R for reading, and L for listening. Thank you, both Valeria and Tatiana, for sharing that. And Valeria has now shared in our internal chat the information that she was talking about, this platform website. Isabel, could you please share it with the people that are attending our session? That would be great, please. Well, thank you. This has been a really, really interesting session, panel session with all of these 4 experts. Thank you so much for sharing with us your expertise, your experience, such interesting topics. Thank you so much for that. Thank you also, Isabel, for sharing with the audience the links that our panelists have shared and further information. So thank you for that. And thanks to everyone. Tomorrow, we are going to start at 9 o'clock. So hope to see everyone there ready to start our second day of this 3rd conference on bilingual education in Chile. I think that there is another link that, yes, that Isabel is going to be sharing with everyone. So thank you for that. You'll be getting these links, and I think that that is all for today. So thank you again, Bob, Tatiana, Billy, Valeria, nice to meet you. Thank you everyone from Isabel, Jose, and everyone behind the cameras listening, and for everyone that has presented this afternoon. And we look forward to seeing another nice set of conferences tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We'll start Chilean time. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. And let's swirl. Remember to
Yeah.
swirl. Remember to swirl in every lesson. Bye-bye.
Bye.